Welcome on in, everybody, to the All Aussie Rules Footy Podcast. This is episode 47. This is round 21 review of the 2024 AFL season. What a wild weekend of football it was. 9 massive games, 9 crazy results that have a massive bearing on finals. With 3 rounds to go, we'll go through all the matches, where it sits everybody, and what's coming up, I guess, over the coming final month of football season. Before we do that, don't forget that this podcast comes out twice a week. We have a review and a preview episode. So the review goes live every Monday, and the preview episode, comes out live every Friday morning. That goes live YouTube and Spotify, so check them all out. Plenty of good content every week, 2 episodes, plus plenty of other videos on the YouTube channel, plenty of socials as well, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. So go check all of that out. Thanks for tuning in. We'll jump straight into the first match of the weekend right now. And we had 2 Friday night games this week. The first one up was the Bulldogs v Melbourne at Marvel Stadium. A game that, I guess, had the potential to knock Melbourne kind of out of finals race. Not officially, but kind of does. And in the end, that's what happened. Bulldogs got the comfortable win. This is probably one of the games that actually kind of went along to the script, I guess you could say. It wasn't too surprising to see the Doggies win this one comfortably. They certainly are in a lot better form than Melbourne over the last month or so. Bulldogs have won 4 in a row now. Melbourne, that's 3 losses in a row. So 2 completely different campaigns, I guess, for both teams. Melbourne 6-8 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, whatever it was, looked like genuine finals chance. Whereas if you go back 4 weeks ago, the Bulldogs got pumped by Port Adelaide and looked like that was going to be the end of their season. But things turn around, and here we are. It's a wild season. So we'll have a look at some of the numbers, I guess, behind this game. The final score was 15-20, 110. So Bulldogs had a lot of shots, just couldn't kick straight. Kicked 37% at goal, which is really low for them and for anybody. Meanwhile, Demons kicked 9 goals, 5, and a couple missed shots completely. Forward efficiency of Bulldogs was really good. Melbourne's was pretty solid too, above average, but the Bulldogs just dominated in that area. They also got the ball forward a lot, plus 26 inside 50s. Controlled clearances, controlled uncontested footy, dominated the turnover game more so than anything. That was a massive discrepancy between the 2 teams. Melbourne didn't really look in it. They did win the second quarter, but they were still 18 points down at halftime, and never really got back into it in a convincing way at any point. Pretty standard numbers, I guess, for the Bulldogs across the board. A bit above their normal average of inside 50s, but over the last 3 weeks, they've dominated the inside 50 count. Plus 22 against Geelong, plus 14 against Sydney, and now plus 26 against Melbourne here. That's as good a 3-week stretch as anybody's really had this year. There was a period earlier this year where Bulldogs also had a similar run through rounds 9 through to 12 when they were plus 36, plus 21, plus 14 and plus 23. So there have been periods where they have absolutely dominated the inside 50s. You take out their 2 bad games in that regard, where one of them was against the best team at inside 50s in the league, which is Brisbane, when they went minus 19 to them, and 5 weeks ago when they got absolutely pumped by Port Adelaide and they lost the inside 50 count there by 11. So you take out those 2 and they've had an incredible year in the inside 50 count. Without those 2 in there, they average plus 11.2. So they're plus 8.6 now. So both are pretty solid numbers. As I said, their forward efficiency was really, really good. That was actually their best performance in that regard this year. So massive performance for them there. Clearances, once again, they're starting to really get that going. I mean, it's never really been a bad part of their game at any point this year. They were a little bit slow early season. They were hit and miss, I guess, for the first 6 to 8 weeks. But yeah, they're really kind of controlling that. But since the bye, they've only lost it once, and that was by 1 to Carlton. So yeah, they're really controlling the clearance game, especially the centre clearances. Contested footy is not probably their area of expertise, as you can see. They're plus 2 per game, but they're not, across the board they're pretty steady on that. Uncontested footy, they've been a bit hit and miss. They're either absolutely dominant in it or they just lose it, but they do lose that area a bit more than you'd expect than a team that's plus 24.9 per game going into this week. They now got that up to plus 26.6 with the massive performance in that regard. In this game, as I said, they've dominated the turnover game here, which 4 weeks in a row they've dominated the turnover game. Yeah, the last 3 weeks especially have been really good. The performance against Geelong, the performance against Sydney, and this one against Melbourne have been outstanding. They're just controlling the game. They've been good in that area all year, to be truthful. They have a couple bad performances sprinkled in the first half of the year. They came out of the bye and got beaten in that area twice in a row against North Melbourne and Port Adelaide, but overall they have a pretty solid record in that regard. Anything else that stands out for them? Not particularly. They lost the tackle count, but that probably is due to the fact that they had more of the ball, I guess. Yeah, so that's a look at Bulldogs. They were just the better team in this one. Quick look at Melbourne. Anything that stands out? I don't think there's anything too exciting here. They're just struggling. They've lost 3 in a row. Granted, they're all finals contenders. They're 3 losses, but Fremantle, GWS, and the Bulldogs. Yeah, it's pretty much the end of the season now for them. They looked all right coming out of the bye. They beat North Melbourne, then lost by 5 points to Brisbane before beating West Coast and Essendon, and looking like potentially they're on for finals. Obviously, they're missing Petrarca. Max Gawn missed a couple weeks there with injury, but their last 3 weeks haven't been good. They've lost by 50 points to Freo, 2 points to GWS, and now 51 to the Bulldogs. And you'd have to imagine that's probably all there will be to say for them this year. They've been just smacked in disposals all year. Just haven't been getting their hands on the ball, which isn't the be-all and end-all of football. There's plenty of teams that just play different styles, but they certainly, more so now than any other point of the year, have been really getting smacked in that regard. They've had more than 30 disposals less than their opponent every week since the bye, except for the game against the West Coast Eagles, which they were plus 76. So 1 week they smacked it, but the rest they've been getting smacked in total disposals. Inside 50s, they have not won an inside 50 count since round 11 against St Kilda. It's round 21 complete, so that's 10 weeks since they've won an inside 50 count. 9 matches, obviously, with a bye in the middle, but yeah, you're just not going to win too many. Melbourne aren't a team that rely on inside 50s. They rely more on their forward efficiency and their defensive efficiency. But it's tough. It's definitely tough, and you'd want to be winning it occasionally. There was the one draw against the West Coast in terms of inside 50 count, but they do get smacked in that regard. Forward efficiency was above their average. It was pretty solid, but unfortunately for them, the defensive efficiency just completely let go. Something that they're usually very good at, but they couldn't stop the Bulldogs from getting shots at goal at any point this game. It was just an absolute domination in that regard. The turnover game for Melbourne's really dropped off. They started the season winning the turnover game in the first 6 matches. Since then, it's fallen by the wayside for them. And that's about all there is for Melbourne in regards to that. Where that sits both of these teams now, Bulldogs are still 7th on the ladder, which is insane when you look at it. The fact that they've won 4 games in a row in convincing style. They have a very high percentage. They have the 3rd highest percentage in the AFL. Getting very close to the percentage of Sydney though, which is crazy. They're only 2 games off the top spot. They're only 1 win away from being in the top 4. They need some results to go their way, but they certainly are going to get a chance. I think they've got Adelaide next week. They win that, maybe a couple teams above them lose. Well, at least one of the teams above them will lose next week because Geelong play Fremantle, so they'll jump above one of those 2 teams. No matter what the result of that one, provided the Bulldogs win, of course, that is. And GWS also play Brisbane, so that's another 2 teams that are above them that play next week. So if GWS go down to Brisbane, then the Bulldogs will be able to jump above them as well. Meanwhile, Melbourne, they are now 2 games and a fair chunk of percentage outside of 8th spot, with 3 teams between them and the 8th. So it is still possible for them to make finals. Very unlikely, we will say. They would have to win all 3 games and get a lot of results to go in their favour, which just isn't very likely. But yeah, they've got Port Adelaide next week. Port Adelaide flying. They were really good this weekend, so won't be an easy one for them. And I mean, technically, depends what other teams do. St Kilda were pretty awful this week, but St Kilda do have Richmond this weekend coming up, so there's a potential that Melbourne could end up dropping down to 14th, maybe. Unlikely to go down to below Adelaide, but Gold Coast and potentially St Kilda both could technically jump Melbourne if they drop a couple more games, which I'm sure they wouldn't be too disappointed if they moved up the draft order just a little bit. So that was the first game on Friday night. The second game was West Coast. Gold Coast was over in the West, and what can we say about this other than the fact that Gold Coast just can't travel? They are a terrible away team this year, and the second half of last year they just can't travel. At the mid-season we were like, maybe it's just because they had been playing tough teams in their away games. That's not the case anymore. They've lost to North Melbourne, they've lost to West Coast, they've lost to St Kilda, they've lost to all these teams not in finals contention in away games. So they have a problem. There's no 2 ways about it. Their numbers in this weren't terrible across the board. Like, they were +7 inside 50s. They got beaten in clearances quite comfortably, which was a little surprising because West Coast are not the best clearance team. They're one of the worst ranked clearance teams. But Gold Coast also lost to the contested football here. West Coast never win contested football. So they just have a problem. When they travel, they just their numbers fall off a cliff. And it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, or to anybody, I don't think. I'm sure Damien Hardwick is pulling his hair out trying to work out why they struggle so much with travelling. But that is what's happening. Looking at, I guess, some of these numbers for both of these teams. We'll look at West Coast first. They were the home team. They won this one. That's their first win in a little while. Their last win was round 10 against Melbourne. They're obviously a much better team at Optus Stadium. I think there was a graphic shown before the game. They're roughly 9 goals better at Optus Stadium than they are away from Optus Stadium. Meanwhile, Gold Coast are probably also a 10-goal worse team on the road than they are at home. So it just turns it into a massive discrepancy based on that. Potentially, like, you look at these two teams, they played each other on the Gold Coast earlier this year. Gold Coast won it by 37 points, and this time they lose it by 10. 37 isn't a massive victory, but still, I don't know what else you can say about it. Everybody's talking about their terrible away record, and I mean, there's so many factors for it, and it just blows your mind, really. West Coast, we'll get back into their stats. Inside 50 count, as we said, they lost that. I mean, they typically lose that most weeks. Across the board, their disposal efficiency was pretty solid for West Coast, slightly above their average, plus they also won it, which they don't win it all that often. As I said, they won the clearances. They've only won the clearances 5 times this year, so to go +9 in clearances is a pretty big effort from them. They won both the centre clearance, stoppage clearances. They won the contested football. That's the first time they've won contested football since round 8 against Essendon. And in that period, they were averaging -16.2 contested possessions a game compared to their opponent, and they went +20 here against Gold Coast. So, reasoning for that, I don't know. Uncontested football, only the 3rd time this year they've won uncontested football. Like, how has Gold Coast allowed this to happen? Is basically the nuts and the bolts of it, because West Coast are winning all the stats here that they just never win, and it kind of just doesn't make sense. They even won tackle count. They're one of the worst tackling teams in the competition, West Coast. So yeah, it's basically just all on Gold Coast here. I think West Coast played really well, don't get me wrong, they were very good, but something's going on with Gold Coast, because their numbers fall apart when they travel, and I don't think we've ever seen something like this in football before. Obviously, they've got another road game this week too, Gold Coast, so watch out, it could be another bad one for them. This game did finish their finals chances. They can't play finals anymore. There's no chance that they can. No matter what, really. Well, no, not really. Definitely, they just can't play finals. They're not the best clearance team. They're not the best contested footy team ever, but they should be a lot better than West Coast. Uncontested footy, they've really struggled lately. They either win uncontested footy by a mile, or they lose it quite by a mile as well. Their last 5 weeks, they've lost uncontested footy by 50, 56, 50, 75 and 43. So their uncontested football has really, really dropped off. Whereas at one point in the season, after round 10, they were plus 12.6 per game. Since that point, which was the game against Carlton at Marvel, from then onwards, they've been minus 30 in uncontested football per game. So that's a turnaround of 42 disposals. So something definitely dropped off from what they were doing at the start of the season compared to what they're doing now. Anything else that stands out in this one? I don't think so, really. They're just really struggling, Gold Coast. They're just not good enough, I don't think. And maybe they've just been overperforming at home. Who knows? What's this mean for both these teams? Not a huge amount. It guarantees that West Coast are not going to finish wooden spoon. I mean, not officially. Technically, Richmond can still pass them. North Melbourne can still finish above them as well. But you'd think with 4 wins now, 2 wins plus a little bit of percentage on Richmond, they should be safe from the wooden spoon. They probably don't really want to win anymore. I've got North Melbourne this weekend down in Tassie, so I can't see them winning that. They don't travel the best West Coast, so I wouldn't imagine they win this one. I think North Melbourne probably win 2 weeks in a row. But yeah, that's them. And Gold Coast, as I said, this rules them out of finals. They're 3 games plus a buttload of percentage behind Carlton at the moment. So with 3 games to go, they can't get them. They'd have to win all 3. Carlton lose all 3. Essendon not win a game. Hawthorn win 1 game and lose percentage. And Collingwood only win 1 game. So it's just not going to happen. So their season's done. As I said, they travel to Melbourne this week as well. So 2 road games in a row for the first time this year. And this one's against Essendon at Marvel. Essendon playing to keep their season alive. Not officially, but kind of. They're currently 9th on the ladder, so they'll have a lot to play for. And Gold Coast are just playing to not go winless on the road this year. That's their one aim here in this one, I think. So that's that game. On to the Saturday games. First up, we had the battle for the wooden spoon. It was North Melbourne, Richmond. Under the roof at Marvel, Saturday afternoon football. And it's almost guaranteed, not officially, but almost guaranteed that Richmond are going to end up wooden spooners now that they lost this one. It was a tight contest most of the way. Richmond came out leading at quarter time. Had a bit of a poor second quarter where North Melbourne kicked away. Even the third quarter was solid by North Melbourne. Richmond fought their way back and looked like maybe they might have a chance to steal it late. But in the end, they fell short. And, I mean, North Melbourne were probably in control of the game most of the way. As we look down the stats, there are some interesting things. Richmond's accuracy was terrible for starters. North Melbourne's was really good. It always is. They're the number 1 most accurate team in the AFL by quite a margin. Whereas Richmond just kicked really poorly. 10 goals, 17. They had their chances. They just wasted them. There's no doubt about that. Their forward efficiency was solid. North Melbourne's was slightly better, but both teams pretty solid in that regard. Richmond plus 16 inside 50s, so they definitely had plenty of chances. That amount of inside 50s, they had plenty of shots and just couldn't convert them. Clearances went the way of Richmond. Contested and uncontested footy went the way of North Melbourne, which isn't that surprising because they tend to do okay in that area lately. Tackles count went North Melbourne's way, and the turnover game went dead level. So I'll look at the 2 teams. We probably won't delve too much into these ones because both teams are the bottom 2 teams on the ladder. But just quickly, anything that stood out, not particularly really. I mean, I guess Richmond's inside 50 count, winning it by plus 16. Their second biggest margin for positive for them this year, only 1 behind what they did against GWS a month ago. They've only won the inside 50 count, 5 times this year. But 3 of them have been in the last 4 weeks. So maybe they're starting to get a little bit more field position into their games, potentially. There's light at the end of the tunnel in that regard for them. Clearances, they had a really rough start to the season in clearances. Since round 10, they've been a lot better. They had a couple bad weeks the last 2 weeks against both Port Adelaide and Collingwood. They got smacked in clearances, but outside of those 2, they've been pretty consistent since round 10. And this was another week of that, really. No surprise they lost contested footy and uncontested footy. North Melbourne probably are the better team out of the 2 in those regards. And yeah, that's about it for Richmond. For North Melbourne, I think the most surprising thing is they lost clearances here. They've been very consistent at clearances all year long, really. Had a bit of a bad patch through rounds 4 through 10. But outside of that, they've been really good. And still just slightly positive in total clearance numbers for the year. Contested footy, they've only lost twice since round 10, so they've been really good in that regard. Same with uncontested footy as well, actually. Since the bye, they've only lost it twice, so no real surprise there. Turnovers, that's their second best result of the year. They've only managed to win the turnover count once this year, so to break even there is a massive reason why they won this game, I guess. They tend to struggle at the turnover game, which doesn't really surprise anyone, I wouldn't imagine. Their second half of the year has been really good in pretty much any way you look at it. They went into the bye 0-11, and since then they've gone 3-6. So their numbers suggest that it's not breaking any doors down or anything. Let's not get too carried away, but even their losses have been a lot closer. Like their average losing margin since the bye is 24.8 points, whereas before the bye it was 52. So even their losses have got better. They obviously got blown out by Sydney a few weeks back by 69, and they lost by 40 to Geelong last week. But they've also had quite a few close ones. They had the 1 point to Collingwood, 3 points to Melbourne, and the 17 to the Bulldogs, 19 to Carlton. So they've been there and thereabouts in multiple games. As I said, that pretty much seals Richmond's wooden spoon. Not technically. They have St Kilda next week, so I mean it's not against the realms of possibility that they could beat them. St Kilda were absolutely horrid today. So yeah, but you'd imagine they're going to finish wooden spooners. And North Melbourne, as I said, they play West Coast next week down in Tassie, so they've got a chance to go up to 4 wins equal with the Eagles, and probably just below them on percentage, unless they win by enough in this one, which actually isn't out of the realms of possibility. They're only 3% behind. If you win it by 40, 50 points, you're going to pretty much make that difference straight away. Yeah, so that's that game. We'll move on to the twilight game. We had Geelong Adelaide down at Geelong, and it was a bit of a topsy-turvy game. Geelong get the win by 5 points in the end. A few nervous moments for them. They looked... I think they kicked away by like 4 goals early in the third quarter, and then all of a sudden Adelaide kicked 5 or 6 in a row, and had a lead going into the final quarter, and it was like, where did that come from? It happened real quick too. I think they kicked 4 goals in the last 7 minutes of the quarter to give them the lead, and then Geelong probably got the momentum a little bit in that last quarter, probably controlled most of the last quarter, and got the win just in the end. Jeremy Cameron kicked 5 or 6 goals. He was really good. Key factors here: Geelong plus 16 inside 50s. They were expected to win the inside 50 count. Maybe not by 16. 16 is quite a good number for them. Their forward efficiency was good. Their disposal efficiency was terrible, but it typically is. Going into this round, I think they were the second worst. This might actually bump them up to the worst disposal efficiency in the competition. Plus 20 clearances though, that's a huge number. Mostly stoppage clearances, only plus 2 in centre clearances, but plus 18 in stoppage clearances is a domination. Plus 23 in contested football, but then Adelaide controlled uncontested football by 52. Tackles went Adelaide's way, and the turnover game, as Geelong are the number 1 turnover team, they showed it here. It wasn't a domination in that area, but it was good enough that they won it by 5, and that kind of was was enough, really, let's be honest. Quick look at what stands out for both teams. I guess Geelong are in really good form. They're 5 wins out of their last 6, with that one loss in the wet to the Bulldogs. So maybe we forgive that one. Disposal count, they've lost it 3 weeks in a row now. I don't think that's any major concern for them, though, to be honest. Inside 50 count has been good over the last month or so, back to kind of where it was when they started the season so hotly. So it's actually probably even better over the last 5 weeks than it was at the start of the year. So that's a positive sign for them. Their forward efficiency is going well. Their defensive efficiency is okay. Some weeks it's good, some weeks it's bad. It's better this week than it has been. Other than last week against North Melbourne, but we kind of just forget that one ever happened. Clearances, as I said, +20. That's their best result this year by a while. Their best previously was +7 in clearances. They're not a clearance team. I think that's probably where this game was won. Neither team are great at clearances. Let's be honest, both teams going into this game, Adelaide -1.5 and Geelong -3.5. Someone had to win it, and it was Geelong, and that's probably where this game was won and lost. +18 stoppage clearances is huge for Geelong when they average -3.2. 3.7, sorry. So, big win there for them. Contested footy is usually around about even, kind of, for Geelong, so no real surprise there. Jumping across to Adelaide, they put up a good fight, don't get me wrong. They bounced back from a poor performance last week against Hawthorn at home, and played solid football, just in the end. Just not quite the class of Geelong, I guess, is what we'll say. Inside 50 count, they typically lose that, and they got smacked in that area here again. It's been certainly in the second half of the season a bit more of an issue than it was at the start of the year. If you're just looking at their last 9 games, they're -9.3 inside 50s per game. Makes it tough to win games. Disposal efficiency wise, they're typically a very good team. This was another good performance in that regard, but not that it helped to win the game in the end. Their forward efficiency was solid. It's going about as good as it has at any point this year over the last few weeks. Clearances is a major concern for them, I think. Especially that stoppage clearance number here was atrocious. They were really good in that regard last week, which is why it's even more strange that they got smashed by so much this week. Uncontested footy, it's a little bit strange that they won it by 52. Because especially late, they haven't been that good. As you can see, they're +10.6 going into this game per game. But if you look at since the bye, they're -9.5 even with this game where they've dominated it. So going into this game, the 5 weeks before, they were -21.8. So turn that around a bit, which is, I guess, a positive for them. But doesn't mean much. Probably not at this time of year once their season's already done. So what's this mean for these two teams? That puts Geelong up to 5th on the ladder. Only percentage of 4th. Actually, only percentage of 3rd, sorry. They got Port Adelaide and GWS above them. And to be honest, GWS have one of the toughest runs home, so they could be in for a show for the top 4. They're going to have every chance, you'd think. Tough game for them next week, though. They've got Fremantle in Fremantle as well. It's going to be difficult for them this week at least. But we'll see what... You never know. Fremantle weren't fantastic this week against the Bombers. Meanwhile, Adelaide, their season, as we've said, is done. A half a game below St Kilda. So that's Adelaide is sitting 15th on the ladder. They can't fall any lower than that. And to be honest, they're probably quite happy losing from here on out and get that number 4 pick. They've got no, they don't have Richmond. They have the Bulldogs this week. So Bulldogs are in fine form, so you'd expect the Doggies will probably take care of them this weekend. Next game, we go to Saturday night football. It was Collingwood-Carlton first up. Oh, both games are on at the same time, but first one we'll look at is Collingwood-Carlton. Big game for both teams. Collingwood needed this to stay in the hunt, I guess. And Carlton wanted this to stay in the hunt of the top 4. It was an interesting game, I guess you could say. Collingwood kind of controlled the scoreboard most of the way until the final few minutes. They kicked the first goal of the last quarter to go up by 32 points or whatever it was before the Blues just turned it on. They turned the game around. They started dominating territory battle, inside 50 count, clearances, everything pretty much in that last quarter was controlled by Carlton. Up until that point, Collingwood had been in control of a lot of the stats, really. But Carlton just came home with a wet sail. Got within a kick with a few minutes to go and had their opportunities, let's be honest. They had a shot after the siren that didn't go through, obviously. So Collingwood got the 3-point win. 2 wins over Carlton this year by less than a kick. Not the best reading for Carlton fans who sit 8th on the ladder now. Those two wins would have them equal on top, just down on percentage. So crazy that how close they are, but also how far off they are. Poor kicking from Carlton in that first quarter. In the end, both teams were like a similar level of accuracy, so it kind of balanced out in the end, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. They kicked 5 goals, 1 in the last quarter, whereas they kicked 1 goal, 8 in the first. Key numbers, key areas of this game. I guess +7 inside 50s for Carlton. Most of that damage done in the last quarter. Clearances, as I said, they controlled the stoppage clearances. Centre clearances were pretty level across both teams. Contested footy went Collingwood's way, which is surprising twofold because Collingwood don't win contested footy that often. And Carlton are one of the best, if not the best, contested football team in the competition. The tackle count went Collingwood's way, no surprise there. They win the tackle count every week. And the turnover game went Carlton's way, which, once again, if you looked at those numbers, you'd be like, oh, it's pretty even. But over the last month, Collingwood have been absolutely smacked in that area, whereas Carlton have been very consistent. So no real surprise Collingwood have fallen away in that area, and this was just another sign of that. I look at some interesting things, I guess, for Collingwood. 2 wins in a row. They needed them. They need probably another 3 wins in a row to make finals. So they'll be hoping to continue that going. Jordan De Goey's out for the season now. He did a hammy, so that's going to make it very difficult for them, no doubt about it. A little bit of a concern for Collingwood is their inability to close out games. It's kind of been an issue for them most of the season, if we're being honest. You take out the game against North Melbourne, where they came from massively behind. Their last quarters have been quite bad this year. They had a lead against the Bulldogs, threw that away in the last quarter. Same against Fremantle. They nearly threw one away against Adelaide the week before that. They nearly threw one away against Hawthorn in round 4. Against Geelong, kind of in it up until the last quarter, then got beaten in the last quarter. Hawthorn, they got smacked all game. And then last 2 weeks they played Richmond, lost that one, and Carlton, they lost that one as well this week and nearly lost the game. Little bit of a concern for them. They've lost the last 4 last quarters, and they've lost 4 of their last 5 second halves. So, and their one win in the second half was by a point. So it is a little bit of an issue for them. Just inability to run out games, I guess. Anything stand out? Inside 50s count. After mid-season, they were looking okay in that regard. But since then, they get beaten in it every week, so no surprise they lost it here. -7 is probably a number that they're okay with. It's when it gets more than 10 is probably where they start to panic, I guess. Because their defensive efficiency is very good. They don't concede that many shots from their from the inside 50s. Clearance count, they're not terribly great at it. -7 isn't the best performance from them, but it's not the worst either. In terms of their worst or the worst case scenario for them. It probably is now that they're losing the turnover game. It's probably an area they need to turn around. Up until the bye, they'd only lost the turnover game 4 times in 13 matches. No, 14 matches, sorry. Since the bye, they've only won the turnover game once out of 6. So, something happened at the bye that has, whether it's a changing game plan, what it is, I don't know, but they've gone from being the best team at the turnover game to the worst team, just about. Not actually the worst, but certainly in the bottom 2 or 3. Tackle count, however, once again, they are the best tackling team in the competition, and this was another week where they showed that. Not Essendon, they played Carlton. Their numbers, they were good at times. Certainly in that last quarter, they controlled that, but just couldn't quite bridge the margin, I guess. They've lost 4 of their last 5 now, with their only win being against North Melbourne. That is a concern. It drops them right to the bottom of the 8. They need to find ways to win games, and they have a big one this weekend that they need to win. But we'll get into that in a minute. Some positives, I guess. They won the inside 50 count. That is an improvement on kind of what they have been doing over the last month or so. Clearance game as well. They were solid in that. Last week they were kind of destroyed in that area, so a little bit of a bounce back there. Did lose the contested footy here. Only the 4th time this year they have lost the contested footy. So I think Collingwood came in with that as being a key factor that they were aiming to do, was to beat Carlton in the contested footy, and they managed it. The turnover game for them has really turned around, certainly since the bye. So that's a positive sign for them as well. Their biggest issue all year has been their inability to defend, and this is no doubt the same thing again. They're one of the worst defensive efficiency teams. Well, not one of the worst, but they're certainly nowhere near the best, and their defensive efficiency here was below the average, or their average at least. So even though they only conceded 84 points, which is 2 points less than what they average against them, it's too many points for a top 4 contender. So it's definitely a concern in that regard. Moving on to have a look at what that means for both these teams. First off, Collingwood sits in 11th on the ladder, 10 wins, 2 draws, has them on 44 points. There's 3 games to go, 3 big games. If they win all 3, that should be enough for finals. If they only win 2, they would need an awful amount of luck because their percentage is quite poor. They've got Sydney this week. It's not going to be an easy run for them. They've got Sydney, Brisbane, then Melbourne. All winnable, but also all losable. Sydney certainly aren't the team that they were 6 weeks ago, but surely Sydney are going to be fired up to get a win. We'll discuss them in a minute. Meanwhile, Carlton, they're sitting 8th on the ladder. 1 win and a bit of percentage ahead of Hawthorn, who they play this week. If they lose this week, they will be out of the 8, because I would imagine the Bombers are going to win. So, yeah, a loss this week would put them out of the 8 and all of a sudden have them on level points with Hawthorn, only just above them on percentage. So, big week for Carlton. I think, off the top of my head, they don't have the hardest last 2 weeks, Carlton. So, they should win 2 games, which, if they win 2 out of 3, they're going to play finals. But unless they win all 3, they're not going to be top 4. They would have to win all 3 and get a little bit of luck if they wanted to be a top 4 team now from where they are. They've just fallen off a little bit. I mean, they're only 1 win off 3rd spot, really, because their percentage is basically the same as Port Adelaide's. They're just below Port Adelaide's. So they've still got everything to play for. They just need to find a way to start winning games again. They need to tighten up their defence and without ruining their offence, I guess, which I think is what's kind of happened the last 2 weeks, because they have conceded slightly under their average the last 2 weeks, but their ability to score has been quite poor the last 2 weeks. The other Saturday night game was a blowout. It was an important game for both teams. It was Port Adelaide Sydney in Adelaide, and this one was over very, very quickly. Port Adelaide kicked the first 11 goals, I think it was, in the end. It was 45-0 at quarter time. It was 86-9 at half time. It was 111-22 at 3/4 time, and then finished at 148-36. It was a domination. The second biggest margin this year for any team, and Sydney still sit top of the ladder. It's wild. Did they not show up? Were they just, I don't know. Port Adelaide were just so good. It's crazy to think, like 5 weeks ago, that Port Adelaide supporters were booing Ken Hinkley and wanting to get rid of him. And here they are, Port Adelaide now sitting 3rd on the ladder, having beaten the top of the ladder team by 112 points. It's been a wild season. I don't know what else to say about it. Plus 35 inside 50s, plus 10 clearances, plus 27 contested footy, plus 81 uncontested footy. It was just a domination in every regard. Every lucky bounce kind of did go Port Adelaide's way, but at the same time, you make your own luck. And they played outstanding football for all 4 quarters, just didn't let up, and Sydney just didn't have an answer. They started slow and just couldn't get going. What does that mean for these 2 teams going forward? I don't know. I and probably most people starting to have concerns about Sydney. It's wild what's happened to them over the last 6 weeks. Firstly, Port Adelaide though, that's 5 wins. 5? Yeah, 5 wins out of their last 6. So since that loss to Brisbane where they booed Ken Hinkley, they've won 5 out of the next 6 games. The first one was only against St Kilda, but then they went and beat Bulldogs. They lost to Gold Coast on the Gold Coast, which is no real big loss because everybody has been losing to them on the Gold Coast except for Brisbane. And then they followed that up with a 41-point win over Richmond, a 14-point win over Carlton, and now a 112-point win over Sydney. It's been a wild season all round, but Port Adelaide's starting to look like one of the form teams of the competition. Over the last 6 weeks, if you did a 6-week ladder, I think they would be 3rd on the ladder off the top of my head. Brisbane would go top. I think Bulldogs maybe 2nd, and then maybe Port Adelaide. Although Port Adelaide might be above Bulldogs now because that is a massive percentage booster. I should do the ladder for the last 6 weeks and see. But anyway, that's irrelevant for now. They're just we're the better team. There's no doubt about it. Absolute domination, start to finish. Fantastic effort from them. Meanwhile, Sydney, they've fallen apart. After being whatever they were at one point, after the bye, 3 weeks after the bye, they'd only lost one game. So 14 games in, they were 13-1. Since then, they've lost 5 out of their last 6. Not too many teams will have lost 5 games in 6 weeks and still been top of the ladder, if anyone ever. Is this the quickest ever downfall of a team that was 3 games clear plus percentage on anybody in the competition? I don't know, maybe. It's been a disaster for them. Their one win in the last 6 weeks was against North Melbourne in Sydney. Other than that, they've been quite poor. They've lost 2 games at the SCG, Fremantle and the Bulldogs, and they've lost 3 away games in a row. So, and this one was a bad one. Their one against Bulldogs was a bad loss. This was a really, really bad loss. There's no 2 ways about it. They've won 1 quarter in the last 2 weeks, and that was by 5 points in the 4th quarter of a blowout. So, make of that what you will, but a team that at one point was the most dominant team we've seen in a long time, all of a sudden are now not just one of the others, they're below the others. Having said what we did about Port Adelaide being probably 2nd or 3rd on the 6-week ladder, Sydney would be bottom 3, I believe. With maybe... Well, everybody's won a game now in that period, I think, haven't they? Or has Richmond not? Richmond hasn't. So Richmond would be below them. Everybody else has won a game. And their percentage would be okay, though, because they did get a 79-point win. But still, I'm going to do a 6-week ladder and see where it all stands. I'll probably post it on my socials. They'll go on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram this week. So check that out. But they are really... I don't know what to say about them. They've fallen apart. It's crazy. And it's possible now that they might not be on top of the ladder as of next weekend. They've got a very big game, home game against Collingwood. You'd have to back Sydney to win it. But at the same time, do they? They've been so bad of late, man. I just don't know what to make of them. They play Collingwood in what is a game that will be very important for both teams. Sydney need to find form. Otherwise, not only are they potentially not going to finish top of the ladder anymore, there's a slight chance they don't finish top 4. The way they've fallen apart, they need to win. It's gone from them just cruising and pretty much no way they were missing top 2 to all of a sudden they probably need to win 2 games. They'd certainly need to win at least one of these 3, but they probably need to win 2 if they want to finish top 2. Maybe even 3. And they'll want to win 3 going into finals. They need to find form before September comes. Otherwise, it's very much likely going to be a straight sets exit for them, the way they're playing at the moment. Meanwhile, Port Adelaide, they're sitting 3rd on the ladder now. They've won 4 of their last 5. They've won 5 of 6, as we said. They're playing Melbourne next week. Melbourne are pretty much eliminated from finals, as we said, so it'll be interesting to see what Melbourne they come up against here. But you'd imagine Port Adelaide win this, which if they do, they'll keep their spot in the top 4. Depending on other results, could be 2nd on the ladder. They won't be able to pass Sydney next week, but they could equal them and just be behind on percentage. But they could pass Brisbane if Brisbane lose. I'll try and speed up a little bit because we've been a bit of a long episode so far. But next up, what was probably going to be on paper game of the round and maybe lived up to it, to be honest. It was a cracker. GWS Hawthorn, big important game for both teams. And Hawthorn controlled this scoreboard, stat-wise, every-wise, for most of the game, until the last quarter, really. GWS kicked 7 of their 12 goals in the last quarter, over doubled their score from three-quarter time, and got home by 2 points after being down by 28 at three-quarter time. It was a very solid comeback, and not the only one we saw this weekend, and not the last one we saw at the weekend either. There's still another one to come. But what to say about this one? Hawthorn +4 in inside 50s. Clearances went the way of GWS, but centre clearances went the way of Hawthorn. Pretty crazy that these two teams, both times I've met this year, have been on small capacity grounds. First one at Utah's in Launceston, now Manuka, and both have gone within a kick. So this matchup and the Collingwood Carlton one, 2 times, have been decided by less than a kick. Collingwood one, both went Collingwood's way, whereas these two teams have split theirs based on who had the home game. I don't think Hawthorn were that much better that they should have been 28 points up at three-quarter time. I think it was a pretty competitive team, pretty competitive game, but GWS turned it on in that last quarter. Overall, their forward efficiency was really good and probably the reason they won this one. They tackled hard. They did a lot of good things. They lost uncontested footy, which is very surprising for GWS. They couldn't handle the hawk ball, as I don't know if everybody calls it that, but Hawthorn play, certainly lately, a very uncontested football game, and it catches teams out. It caught Collingwood out big time, and they've beaten here GWS, who are probably the best uncontested football team in the competition, and Hawthorn controlled that area. So it's crazy what this Hawthorn team is doing. What's that mean for both of these teams? Hawthorn now sit 10th on the ladder. A win there, would it have made much difference? They'd still not be in the 8. They'd be above Essendon, sitting 9th on the ladder, just down on percentage. So it's not like it's hugely costly for them, but it could be. Depends what they do next week and the 2 weeks after that. They definitely need to win 2 if they want to play finals, but they might have to win all 3. Kind of like Collingwood, they are pretty much in the same spot as Collingwood, let's be honest. And they don't have an easy one this week. They've got Carlton, so it's a big important game for them, and it's a big important game for Carlton. Both teams are going to have a lot riding on this. The loser is in real danger of missing finals, whereas the winner certainly doesn't guarantee themselves a spot, but certainly puts them with a strong case for it. Certainly in Carlton's side of things. GWS, all of a sudden they're in 4th on the ladder. It's crazy. You don't know what. This season, everything's so tight that just one result can change so many things. If they had lost, they would be sitting 8th on the ladder. But they won, so now they're 4th on the ladder. It's wild. They've got Brisbane this week up at the Gabba. It's going to be a tough one, and one that they're probably not expected to win, to be honest. And if they lose, there is a whole bunch of teams below them that could jump them. Obviously Geelong or Freo, the winner of that will jump them. Bulldogs will jump them if the Bulldogs win. So there's 2 teams that will potentially pass them if they lose next week. Carlton as well, if they win, will jump them. So there's 3 teams that could jump them just next week if GWS don't win. So they're in a little bit of trouble and they're in some good form, don't get me wrong. They've won, 5 in a row. They haven't been the most convincing 5 wins in a row ever. The one against Carlton was really good, don't get me wrong. That was a great performance. Certainly when they were 5-6 goals down in the first quarter. Richmond was okay. Gold Coast was okay. And then they've had 2 close ones in Melbourne and Hawthorn. But at the end of the day, winning games of football is winning games of football. And that's that's what they're doing. Yeah. So what more can you say? They just need to keep winning though. If they want to play make top four, they have to keep winning. They probably need to win all three. If they want to play, they could still miss finals. They lose next week and then lose the last two. They may well end up missing out, which is wild to say, seeing that they're fourth on the ladder with 13 wins. But it is feasible that 13 wins is not going to be enough this year, which is crazy. You might need more than 13 wins. They should be fine. But that doesn't mean they will be. Anyway, move on to game number 8 of the weekend. And it was another comeback. Essendon Fremantle. She was an interesting game at the MCG. The Bombers kicked away early, started really well. Then second quarter, Fremantle dominated. Third quarter, Fremantle still controlled the game. And looked like they were just going to run away to not an easy win, but a comfortable enough win. And then the Bombers came, and they came fast and kicked a lot of quick goals, got themselves back in it, took the lead with still plenty of time. Fremantle then, with 40 seconds to go, tied the game up. Essendon just put in a lot of effort. They turned up when they needed to, game on the line, season on the line, and they stood up and did what they needed to keep their season going. And in the end, the scores were level with 40 seconds to go. Zach Merritt broke out of the centre and handballed it off, had a shot at goal and just missed, but that 1 point was enough. And then they defended well enough and got the ball back even to stop Fremantle from going end to end to win it. Just a good performance in the end from Essendon. Fremantle, they'll be happy with how they went up until 3/4 time. I reckon they'll be pretty disappointed with themselves for letting it slip there in the last quarter. The one thing that kept them in the game, though, or had them so far in front at least, was their accuracy. They kicked really straight today, whereas the Bombers kick straight as well, to be honest. Above 50% is a good result in that regard. But, Fremantle were outstanding. Forward efficiency, Bombers struggled again. Their all-round efficiency always kind of struggles. Their defensive efficiency today was really, really good, though. They gave up 14 goals in not many inside 50s, but that's only because Fremantle kicked straight. Like, they defended as good as they have this year, in my opinion. And they still need to work out their forward efficiency. The both areas are areas that they have to improve if they want to be genuine chances to win games in finals, in my opinion. What else was interesting here? I don't know. Tackles obviously went Essendon's way. It usually is. I think the biggest factor in this game was clearances, to be honest. In the end, Fremantle ended up winning overall clearances by 3, which isn't that great when they are the number 1 team against like a mid-range clearance team. But at one point early on in the game, Essendon were dominating that. So Freo did well to get that back in their favour, but they probably were going into this expecting that they would win it by a bit more than that, and they didn't. And that's probably why Essendon controlled the game in many facets. What's that mean for these two teams? Essendon sit 9th on the ladder. They've got a genuine chance now to make finals. They have Gold Coast this week in Melbourne, so they should win that. Gold Coast can't win away games. They win that, it might not even get them into the 8, but it might also, depending on whether Carlton and Bulldogs win or not. If either of those two teams lose, then Essendon would be able to jump them next week. They need to win 2 out of 3 to have a chance at finals. potentially have to win all three, but I don't think they do. I think they've got Gold Coast in Melbourne this week. Then they've got Sydney in Melbourne. Sydney are not the team they were, so they're both winnable at present. And then they finish with Brisbane in Brisbane, which might be a really tough game to finish the season, and it could come down to that for the Bombers. So we'll see how that plays out, I guess. Meanwhile, Fremantle, that drops them out of the top four. If they had have won that, they'd be sitting third on the ladder. However, they lost it, so they're sixth on the ladder. They're 12.5 wins, and they've got Geelong in Freo next week. Big game, both teams sitting 5th and 6th on the ladder. The winner still has a chance at top 4. The loser probably doesn't have a great chance at top 4, but will be potentially fighting for a spot in the 8 come the last couple rounds. Big game for Freo. That's game 8 of the round. We've got one to go. This one is St Kilda Brisbane. It's at Marvel Stadium. It was at Marvel Stadium, I apologise. And she was a blowout. Second blowout of the weekend, and not quite as dominant as Port Adelaide's win, but dominant enough as is. Brisbane won it hugely, 85 points. Never looked like losing this one. St Kilda had 1 goal to half time, whereas Brisbane kicked 9 in the first half and then 10 in the second. So she was just domination from start to finish. They were really good in every facet. St Kilda kicked poorly at goal, but that doesn't excuse them. Their forward efficiency was hopeless. Their inside 50 differential was hopeless. They had their worst contested football game of the year, and in fact one of the worst performances in contested football of anybody this year. I think it was the 5th time that a team hasn't had 100 contested possessions in a match. They only got 96, and they went minus 43 in contested football. That is an absolute shellacking in that facet. How that happens, I don't know. They won uncontested football, but St Kilda, it means nothing to win uncontested football. You have to go and win a hard ball sometimes. I know your season was already over. The game meant nothing, but wowee, did they show nothing in this. There's not much more to say about this game other than the fact that St Kilda were putrid. The other thing you can say, I guess, is Brisbane, they're very dangerous, man. They've had a wild season. Been multiple times that their season looked done. Like, everybody knows they lost their first 3 games. Things weren't looking great. But even round 7, that was after round 7, they'd lost 2 weeks in a row. One of them by 26 points to Geelong, and then 54 points to GWS. And at this point, they're 2 and 5, and looking like they're going to struggle. 2 weeks later, they drew with Adelaide, and I was like, what is going on here? And then 2 weeks after that, they lost to Hawthorn. And going into the bye, they only had 4.5 wins at the bye through 11 games. 4.5 wins. And then since then, they haven't lost a game. They've had a couple close ones, to be fair. They only beat Sydney by 2 points. They beat Melbourne by 5 points. But overall, they've just been consistent. Crazy. Average winning margin of 31.8 points in that time frame. This was their second biggest win of the season, only behind their win over Richmond. They are all cylinders firing. They're a dominating team at the inside 50s. Their forward efficiency is very good now. It was the area of their game that they kind of struggled early season, and was a reason why they were perhaps not performing well. Like in their first 9 games, their forward efficiency was down at about 42.2%. Since that point onwards, it's 54.8%. So it is a an insane turnaround. Because all year round, they've been dominating inside 50s from the start, from week one. In fact, from 5 weeks in, when they had 2 wins, they were averaging 16.5 more inside 50s than their opposition. So they were more dominant at inside 50s than they are now in that first 5 weeks. But their forward efficiency was just really bad. They couldn't convert anything into shots, and it was costing them. They've tidied that up. They dominated that area here, and they dominated defensive efficiency here as well. They're going to be hard to beat going forward. They are the team to beat in my eyes. They're looking more and more likely that they're going to have a home final and a second chance. There's a good chance they're going to have a home prelim from here, which is crazy. Home prelim, it's going to be hard to beat them. Whoever has to go up there for prelim final week is going to have their work cut out for them. And Brisbane have moved into premiership favourites, and it's no real surprise why. The funniest thing is that equal second favourite for the premiership is Bulldogs, who are currently 7th on the ladder. Moving on to what these two teams have to come for the rest of the year, well, not for the rest of the year, but next week. As I said, St Kilda, their season's done. They're 14th on the ladder. They could potentially go up 1 or 2 spots. I don't think they would want to, though. But they do play Richmond this week, which is probably a game they win. Which they probably don't want to, because they would probably rather lose and drop below Adelaide. But we'll see what happens in that regard. Meanwhile, Brisbane, they're flying. They haven't lost since the bye, and they've got a home game against GWS. They lose it, there's a chance that they could not finish top 2. If they win it, though, they're potentially going to be top spot by the end of the weekend, which would be an amazing turnaround from where they were pre-bye to where they are now. It's been a wild turnaround for them, no doubt about it. So still a lot to play for. We're down to officially 12 teams that can still make finals. I've got it at 11 though, because I've written Melbourne off now. They're not making finals from where they are. So 11 teams in contention. 2 less than we had last week. I've written off Gold Coast and now Melbourne. Technically, Melbourne can make it, but I'm writing them off. I don't see a world where they do it. So big couple weeks coming up. Don't forget to come back and check out the rest of the content. Before we go, we've just got me tips from the week. Don't forget, while I'm getting that up, like, comment, subscribe, all of that jazz. I know this has been a long episode, longer than normal. I did waffle maybe a little bit too much early days of this episode, but I appreciate everyone for tuning in nonetheless. Tipping went awful, let's be honest. Not impressed with myself here. We got the first game, no big surprise there. Bulldogs won it by 51. We said 28, so we weren't too far off. I should have listened to my rule. I had one rule a few weeks ago, and that was we back Gold Coast every home game, and we do not back them on the road. What did I do? I backed them on the road. I will not be doing that again this week. I can tell you that right now. Put me down for Essendon right now. Essendon will be Gold Coast. So we got that one wrong. Then in the battle of the bottom, I went the wrong way. Richmond played good enough to win it, in my opinion. But in the end, North Melbourne won the game. They were entertaining to watch. There's no doubt about it. It was a good win for them. I got Geelong right. Only just did they get over the line. I got Carlton wrong. Collingwood turned up for Pendlebury and, got the win. We got Port Adelaide right. I said by 3 points. They won by 112. So do I really deserve to get that one right? Maybe not. But I'm going to take it anyway. And then GWS Hawthorn. Up until the last quarter, we had this one right. Hawthorn collapsed, fell apart, and GWS just went and won it. And then the next game, once again, another one. Up until in the last quarter, I had it right. Fremantle were cruising. Then the Bombers went vroom, and smoked them as well. So, 2 in a row. That annoys me. And then we finished with Brisbane, right? So, yay. We got 4 out of 9. I'm disappointed that it wasn't at least 6 out of 9. We had 2 teams fall apart on us, but that's footy tipping. That's this season. It's a tight season, man. Like, who knows what's going to happen? Like, it's incredible, like, how close all these teams are. Like, from top of the ladder down to certainly the top 12. There's only 5 games between the 12 teams. 4 games between the top 11. 2.5 games. No, just 2 games, sorry, between the top 8 and 2.5 games. Yeah, no, so I got that completely wrong, sorry. 2 games between the top 8, 2.5 games top 9, 3 games top 11, and 4 games for the top 12. That's wild. That's where we sit after 20 matches. Like, everybody is so tight. Even, I think, St Kilda and Adelaide are also, you look at their percentage, they're clearly not that far off. They've just had some results that haven't gone their way, and that's been what's cost them. The bottom 3 teams are clearly not currently in the same competition as everybody else. Yeah, they can occasionally beat one of the teams above them, but overall, those bottom 3 are in a different competition, and then top 15 is tight, in my opinion. And this year, it's just about getting into finals and having some form and not many injuries at that time. And whoever does that is going to win. At the moment, it's Brisbane or Bulldogs. But Port Adelaide are starting to make a charge. So, who knows? It's going to be an entertaining final 3 weeks. Make sure you keep tuning in to the All Aussie Rules podcast. Thanks for listening. If you made it all this way, I appreciate you. We'll be back on Friday with a hopefully shorter episode and a preview of round 22, all 9 matches. Thanks for tuning in. Catch us on the next one.